I met this awesome girl on Tinder. We vibed for a few days, then arranged to meet up the following week. I wanted to impress her, so we arranged to meet at a super fancy restaurant. She also hinted that she liked jewellery, so being the generous soul that I am, I bought her a fancy gold wrist tie thing. I forgot the name of it, but it was expensive. On the night of the date, I ended up waiting outside this super fancy restaurant, in a shirt and tie, looking like Dwight from The Office or something. I just felt dumb. Anyway, I received a text from her, saying she was going to be late, and that she'd lost her bank card, so could I cover her half of the bill? No worries, I thought, so I walked to a nearby ATM to take out a little extra cash, as well as a generous tip for whatever server ended up serving us. Got to show off that generous side, right? I walked back to the place, texted her, and she responded, she's sorry, but she's going to be even later than she first thought. Again, I responded, no worries. She was super hot and worth waiting for. She had this amazing smile, cute brown eyes, and from the gym selfie she put on her profile, you could see it from the front, if you know what I mean. Anyway, things started getting a little annoying when she texted me and said she couldn't find the restaurant, and could I meet her further down the street so we could walk there together. Of course I'm going to say yes. No way I'm just going to say no and walk back home. So I did as I was asked, and walked further down the street to a quieter part of the neighbourhood, in order to keep an eye out for her. A few minutes passed by, and there was still no sign of her. I started to worry that she wouldn't show, and the upset feeling that I was going to be stood up was sinking in. But my eyes lit up when I saw her name on my phone. She said she was waiting in a nearby parking lot because she didn't feel safe walking up to meet me alone. I got that, I totally did. She was probably wearing some super fancy dress and heels. But when I got to the parking lot, I started getting a bad feeling. It was super dark, pretty much deserted, with only a few cars parked around the edges. And it was actually way off from the main thoroughfare, so that walking into the place, I'd be pretty much alone and out of sight. But I'm thinking with my other head, you know? So I can only really blame myself when that lily white meth head put a gun in my face. I thought it was just a random robbery at first, but when they demanded I turn over the jewellery, I knew what had happened. It was these guys the whole time. They had completely catfished me, built me up, then smashed me down in the worst possible way. Not only was I down by about $600 in cash and jewellery, but I had got it into my head that this girl, this totally fictional girl, was going to be the love of my life. I think that hurt more than just losing the money. You can get the money back, but not the self-worth, the self-esteem. So be careful out there, guys, especially when meeting strangers online. This is a pretty weird story. I'm a 24-year-old man. I was friends with a 29-year-old woman who had 2 kids. Her mum and my mum were best friends at the office where they worked a couple of years back, and our families became pretty close. Me and this girl, let's call her Angela, became quite close. We were never romantically interested in each other. We just had a very compatible sense of humour. She was a single mum, and she honestly struggled a lot. Her former husband seemed like a really good guy, but the pressure of raising a kid broke him. He tried convincing Angela to get an abortion a week before the baby was born. That was pretty messed up, and then he started gambling obsessively. Angela told me that he gambled away their combined savings account, which was about $8,000. Their marriage lasted for about a year or 2 before he finally just disappeared. As bad as it might be to say, she was better off without him. Raising 2 kids might not be very easy, but raising 3 is a lot more difficult. Angela and I had become good friends after I started helping her take care of her kids. I honestly felt bad for her, and as much as her family tried to help, they didn't have enough time outside of work to make a big difference. I didn't do a lot, but she was always appreciative of what I did. She was really lonely and had been looking for a guy for a while, and then had the great idea to download Tinder. I remember her telling me about this one really handsome guy. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect, but from the first time I met him, I hated him. I had a really bad feeling about his motives. The situation was just weird. Now, don't get me wrong, Angela is a great person, and any guy would be lucky to have her. But she was a single mum. It didn't matter how nice or attractive she was. She had 2 kids, didn't make very much money, and heavily relied on her friends and family to keep her life together. I always expected her to either go for an ugly wealthier guy that could take care of her, or a guy with kids of his own. But this guy that she was dating now, he was strange. He was attractive, had a good job, and seemingly had everything going for him. And here was the kicker. He claimed to have never dated a girl before, and he was 28. Every time I saw them together, it was so obvious to me that he was faking his personality in order to impress Angela. And the sad part is, she totally bought all of it. She ate it up with a shovel. Call me a jerk, but when something seems too good to be true, it normally is. I knew there was going to be some kind of dark demon behind this little act. He was going to turn out to be a drug addict, or something worse. I was honest with Angela about the whole situation from the very beginning, and she really didn't appreciate that. She started telling me to mind my own business, and that I should just be happy for her. After the 3rd or 4th time that I said something to her, she told me that I should stop being jealous, and that I was in love with her. Angela was definitely not my type, and I was not attracted to her. It really pissed me off that she insinuated that I was, but after that, I stopped helping her, and created a lot of distance. About 2 weeks had gone by before I started feeling worried about her. Again, I decided to look into the guy that she had been dating. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. If I could somehow prove it, then at least I could save her some trouble. This is going to sound ridiculous, but it really was this simple. I googled his name. I looked around on the first few pages in the results, and found his Facebook account. It was a public profile, and I could view everything that he'd commented on and posted. But here was the weird part. The profile said he was in a relationship with another girl, and it was another single mum. But even worse, he had a couple of posts about the stigma against pedophiles. It had only been a few months since he posted a 5-paragraph rant about how children can be in love with adults, and that age was just a number. I found it really disturbing, and immediately knew that he had some bad intentions with Angela's kids. I got together with Angela, and I made sure that her mother was with us when I told her. Her mum was very street savvy, and I knew she would side with me on this issue. I didn't want Angela to think that I was making stuff up. I took as many screenshots as I could, and I showed both of them. First of all, Angela didn't even know that he had a Facebook. He had told her that he didn't believe in social media, and even worse, he had watched her kids alone before. Angela's mum freaked out, and started lecturing her about creepy men. I could tell that it was really tough for Angela to accept the truth. I know it's hard, but this guy clearly wanted to be with her kids more than he did her. Angela apologized to me for being naive about the situation, and she thanked me for going through the trouble. Angela told me that they reported him to the police, and she broke up with him. She asked her kids multiple questions about potentially being abused, and it seemed like nothing had happened, thankfully. This was a really close call. I'm just glad that I was smart enough to Google the guy's name. If I hadn't done that, I don't even want to think about what could have happened to her kids. All of the information that I used to convince Angela and her mother that this guy was dangerous came from one Google search. A search that Angela should have done herself. She told me that she was going to take a break from guys for a while. I went back to being a good friend and helping out, and everything has been fine since. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. When I'm bored, I sometimes hop onto Tinder to meet new and interesting people. I rarely attempt to meet these people in person, and when I do, it is normally to meet up. But this was one of those nights. I met a really nice sounding woman who said she loved caffeine and video games. We were talking for a while that night, and when I was ready to get off and go to bed, she asked if I wanted her number. I didn't want her to have my number, so I said, "No, that's okay, I know where to find you," meaning on the Tinder app. Flash forward to the next day, when the new Assassin's Creed Origins game came out. I had pre-ordered the game months in advance, and walked into literally the closest GameStop to my house. And guess who I see behind the counter? She had a sheer look of horror on her face, but I hadn't quite figured out it was her yet. There wasn't much of a line, and I got up to the register, and she yells, loud enough so everyone in the store could hear, "This is what you meant?" And she stormed off to the back room. A couple of minutes passed, and another employee came out and asked me to leave. One thing I should point out is that in person, this girl looked nothing like her profile picture, so I still didn't know what on earth was going on. I explained to this new employee that I was here to pick up my pre-order, and that I didn't understand why I needed to leave. They then threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave, so I gave up and left. Later that night, I received a message on Tinder asking how I knew where she worked. I did not respond to this message. Instead, I called the GameStop and explained that I didn't want to upset Kathy any more than I had, and asked if they could move my pre-order to another store. The manager apologized to me and was able to move my pre-order. Even though this is the closest GameStop to my house, I haven't returned, and it will probably be a while before I do.